They called him Freak. He was always weak, to the point where you thought he was going to collapse at any moment, and the few times he spoke, his voice was all that managed to come out of his mouth. As you can see, it's not a nickname that shows acceptance. You see, Freak and I were at school together, so I saw with my own eyes the torture he was put through. It wasn't an unusual sight to see crowds of children gathered around him, each taking their turn to have a little poison dripped on him for his appearance. But also in general, throughout the lessons, there would always be someone making fun of him for who he was. You can imagine how he felt, to accept all this violence, verbal and physical, just because you were born that way. Let the smart kids at school use you, to show how superior they are in their minds. If you're wondering about his parents, things weren't any better at home either. His mother was a drug addict, and his father an alcoholic. No one cared about the systematic bullying their child was receiving. In fact, no one expected him to endure this whole situation for so many decades, let alone turn into the kind-hearted person he became. Years after we graduated from school and moved on with our lives, the Freak chose to return to our school to work as a janitor. He chose to hang around every day and clean the same hallways where he was tortured. Maybe it was an attempt by him to confront his old demons. I don't know. What I do know is that he happened to be there when my son was going through the most difficult time of his life. It was a cruel twist of fate that my son ended up facing the exact same kind of bullying that I, in the case of the house, was a silent spectator to. The even more ironic element is that the boys were the children of the people who bullied the Freak. A vicious cycle of anger and hatred. I was forced to face the same indifference that I had shown all these years. The same empty promises that the school made when it turned a blind eye like back then. Trying desperately day after day to put an end to my son's drama, I realized how rotten our society is and how deep this rot has gone. I could do nothing more than watch the spark from my child's eyes fade and gradually turn into a helpless corpse with legs, a pale shadow with no appetite for life. Believe me, I tried everything you can think of. I approached the school authorities, the teachers, the school counselor, even the principal, but to no avail. They tried to reassure me, assuring me that it would stop, but it never did. I also spoke to the parents of the 4 boys, who were the worst of all, and begged them to do something. I threatened to call the police and take it to court, but it ended up making things worse. My son started hiding what was happening and his bruises from me. My attempts to help him only ended up pushing him further away from me. The Freak was truly a godsend. He had open ears the moment my son felt ready to confess what he was going through to someone. Maybe it was because the little boy had been through the same ordeal, so there was understanding. Even today, I believe that the conversations they had with each other played a crucial role in the fact that my son did not make a disastrous decision. They communicated so well that my son saw him as his uncle. Until the torture escalated one last time. I was at the office that day when my phone rang. I remember the coffee cup falling from my hands and shattering into 1,000 pieces. I remember leaving work in a daze, getting in my car and driving to the beginning of the bike path in the woods behind the school, which was now cordoned off with police tape. I remember pushing the police away and seeing how battered and bloody his body was. My son's, I still have nightmares about his body. We all knew who had done it, but knowing something is not the same as being able to prove it in court. And besides, the suspects were all 4 children, minors. Even if they were to be convicted, the justice system would get them out after 2-3 years. No, justice had to be served immediately, without delay, and it wouldn't come from the mouth of a judge. No, things needed a medieval touch. An eye for an eye. Once again, the Freak was the one who stopped me from doing something irreversible. If it hadn't been for him, I would be rotting in prison right now. He showed up at my house 2 days after my son died, in a miserable state. crying, and trying to tell me how much it had cost him. I wiped the tears from his eyes and told him to come inside. We talked about my son, accompanied by plenty of alcohol and cigarettes. What seemed like a visit of sympathy quickly evolved into a plan for revenge. Probably not revenge, justice. We hunted them down one by one, under the cover of darkness, through the shadows. We moved like death, waiting for the right moment to attack. Of course, I couldn't do it alone. We had to make alibi, choose the right tools to cut fences and chains, get rid of blood-soaked clothes, and so on. The freak was what guided me through everything. Even when I ran in fear to my car, with vomit stuck to my throat and question marks about whether I could accomplish what we had planned, he was there patting me on the back and reminding me that I was doing it for my son, for my boy, who should have been next to me, with me. By the fourth victim, I was pretty used to everything. The sound of the crowbar hitting the back of their head and my clothes filling with blood. Something to be expected. I felt nothing. Fear, sadness, satisfaction, nothing. I was just a little happy that it was all over. Of course, I hadn't calculated that from that point on. Every night, I would have nightmares. He turned himself in to the police. The reporter's voice boomed through the television. The infamous serial killer responsible for the murder of many children. I felt a knot in my stomach. The atrophied face of the little guy filled the screen. A sigh of relief left my mouth. He had done it. He had taken all the responsibility upon himself. A final gift for the father of the boy he was caring for. He knew the cops wouldn't stop searching. He knew we weren't perfect criminals, and that sooner or later they would catch us. So he sacrificed himself to save me. Or at least that's what I thought at first. The pictures of the victims started to appear one after another on the TV. 5 pictures in total, including my son. My mind went blank, and I almost fainted. I grabbed my car keys from the counter and ran out quickly. Every step was a stab in my heart. Getting into the car and searching for the right key with sweaty hands, I tried to digest what I had just seen. They must have been wrong. Surely they were either confused or just trying to frame him for my son's murder. To close another case, they let me meet him. He was in a dark and cold cell. He stood up as soon as he saw me. He walked to the iron bars of the door and put his hands between them. He didn't say anything to me. He just looked me in the eyes and started laughing.